All right, we love the enthusiasm. Again, for those who are coming in a bit later, we're gonna hold any other audible reaction till the end of our roughly 20 minutes together, which will start now. Ray Huang, we are here in the Valley. Can you share with us what role the San Fernando Valley has played in your life, in your work, and if you were elected, what specifically would you do to improve the lives of those living and working here?
Yeah, over the last decade that I've been working as a housing advocate at LA Voice and then at Housing Now, I actually worked with a number of housing organizations here and homeless advocacy organizations here in the Valley. And together we were working on ensuring that we could actually build truly affordable housing, particularly for those who are unhoused, and fight to ensure that we could provide the revenue for that. It was a challenge, I'll say, to be able to do that, but we were fairly successful in being able to put together a number of actions and bring political education to the community. The other side of it as well is over the last, especially just the last few years, and especially since I've been running, I've been building a lot of close relationships with entertainment workers who work and live here in the Valley and have talked about the challenges of not being able to afford rent, not being able to find a job in this economy, and really struggling to be able to keep the art that they love.
You describe yourself as the only true progressive in this mayoral race this year, and you've called for radically reimagining how LA is governed. As you know, the mayor operates within a bigger council. There are 14 council members, there are entrenched bureaucracies, there's union contracts, there's powerful interest groups which oversee 50,000 employees. What is your realistic strategy for achieving the kind of transformational change that you talk about when the big political machine that you are raging against will still be in place on day one?
I appreciate that question, especially naming the raging against the machine. It being a part of our campaign slogan, I guess, a little bit now. So here's the thing. When people like myself are elected, or campaigns like ours are elected, which is clearly stating exactly the kind of movement, of politics, of shaping of government that we want, it is because the people of Los Angeles have spoken that they want something else. What I have experienced both in running in this campaign as well as just being a neighbor on my block is that people are frustrated with our current situation. And it's not just that we're facing right now with the Trump administration. For years, even before, we've been struggling to be able to afford rent. We've been struggling to be able to just have one job, one good job that pays enough, and not have to hold more than one job to be able to provide for basic things for our family. Right now, the challenges that we face in government are because I believe we do not have a collaborative leadership. We need to have somebody who can bring and build coalitions, bring people together, offices and departments together, folks who might not always agree, but do see that we have a vision of Los Angeles that needs to be able to build a future where our families can thrive, where we have real, true climate resiliency. And here's the thing, I've been a coalition builder now for years. This has been the primary work that I've been doing here in Los Angeles and even before. And one of the things that I do strongly believe in is that there are ways to bring people together, and it's by building true, honest relationships and also being accountable and also being transparent about where you want to go together. And we can do that by building a green capital infrastructure plan collectively across all the offices to decide where we want to go in the future of Los Angeles. And when you build it together, you collaborate on it together, it means that you are now building a future together and everybody has a stake. The second thing that I truly believe needs to shift with Los Angeles politics is that we need to turn our government into one that is a co-government model where we see Angelenos, everyday ordinary Angelenos, as co-partners in building this city. For too long, we've been leaving them out of the process. They don't know what's happening in City Hall. They have to find out through sitting in long meetings and then only being able to speak at public comment for just 1 or 2 minutes. We need to bring it to their neighborhoods, which is why one of the biggest parts of my platform is being able to bring in a participatory budgeting process, which is when the public gets to help decide and determine and give voice to where our city budget should go. Our budget is a moral document. It tells us exactly what we value and what we want. And we need to allow Angelinos to participate in that process so that way we can move forward together as a city.
I want to talk a little bit more about the specifics of the coalition building that you just mentioned, because you just said people of LA want something else, but that doesn't mean that something else that they want is the same thing. And it appears to me that the dynamic tensions in our city are really at an all-time high between the YIMBYs and the NIMBYs, those calling to defund the police, those calling for thousands more officers, those who believe that encampments should be dismantled, calling on house folks zombies, and those who believe that sweeps are a violation of basic human rights. Can you tell us very specifically how the work that you've done building coalitions would look when you've got people who are so diametrically opposed, living in a media ecosystem that only fuels those divisions?
I really appreciate that question, Alex, because this is something that I feel in my body and soul sometimes when I'm looking and reading the news, when I'm spending time with people, is how much we are earnestly looking for something new and we're struggling to find it because we're so siloed in our own spaces. And we've seen this siloing happen even more over the past number of years as the internet has now really shaped the discourse and the way that we communicate. What I have been involved in as a coalition builder is bringing people together who don't always agree, but to create spaces for conversation, for dialogue, for political education, for discourse, so that way we can move forward together. I'll give you an example. In my own neighborhood, I have neighbors who disagree greatly with my perspective. They are people who voted for Trump. They are people who don't believe that there's such thing as climate change. There's so many different views. But then when we come and talk together, we realize actually that we have the same common goal, which is that we want to have a safe neighborhood for ourselves. And in our dialogue and conversations, we realize actually that there's a lot more in common, that politics is actually something that we often focus too much on, where it's really the relationships which bring us together, which is why I'm so focused on being able to create more third spaces for us who don't normally get a chance to spend time together, to do that. Fast and free buses, I understand, is about transit, and we can go into the policy later. But one of the reasons I love public transit is because when I use public transit, I'm sitting next to people I don't usually see, I don't usually engage with. And it so happens that a lot of times I begin a conversation and I get to know them. It's these times and moments and spaces that we need to build out in Los Angeles so that way we can actually find more common ways to connect with one another and find common vision.
Can we talk about how you do that at scale in a city of 4 million people? And let's kind of move this into the realm of housing. When you've got the YIMBYs or yes in my backyards, we're very fervent and adamant about that, and areas where people say absolutely no more housing in our neighborhood, that's not what it is designed for. How would you navigate that? And what is your vision for trying to get back on track for the hundreds of thousands of homes that we're supposed to be legally building right now, but we're clearly not?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So the reason why people are fighting is because we are in this place where right now everyone's fighting for the crumbs. We're in competition. What we have a lack of right now in this city is a prioritization of focus of putting resources that our city has into building housing as fast as possible and as much as possible, and in particular focusing on for those who need it the most. And so I would be utilizing every single power and resource we have, revenue opportunity, as well as creating new revenue opportunities through an Office of Revenue and Innovation to identify dollars that are being underutilized in our departments in government right now, as well as identify new forms of revenue that we can put forward, such as a vacancy tax, and then being able to use all of those dollars to build truly affordably. Now here's the thing, we are spending hundreds and millions of dollars into the Inside Safe program. Those dollars, instead of a short-term Band-Aid solution with no end in sight, need to start to convert over into building permanent affordable housing. One of those systems of being able to make sure it's permanent is social housing. Social housing is community and publicly owned housing that is permanently affordable because it's no longer on the speculative market, and it's also resident managed. What that means is that we don't have to worry about losing the affordability of that building after what we often have, which is the affordability clause ends under the low-income housing tax credit clause. And so we need to be able to ensure that we're moving into a system where our tax dollars are going to be permanently be able to stabilize our housing.
The flip side of our housing crisis is our homelessness crisis. Huang, you've been incredibly critical of 4118, which is of course the ordinance which bans encampments within close proximity to places like schools. Can you explain to us your concern here, and if you were mayor, what would be your response to residents and business owners who say, my kids can't go to school, these encampments are harming my quality of life? What would you tell them?
So here's the thing, we know the way to solve homelessness is by putting people into homes. 4118 is it's when we remove people and their belongings, and primarily everything that they own, and they no longer have access to anymore. The problem with removing all of people's belongings over and over again is that you destabilize the person who's unhoused over and over again. You're not providing them with the solution of what they're looking for or they need. We're just destabilizing them, which can unfortunately result in no longer having access to their ID that they need to get the services they need. The second is that they also then become further destabilized. If they already are struggling with mental health, then it's going to get worse. What we need to do is put our money and time and resources not into 4118, which is extremely expensive, which does not actually work, it's ineffective, and it's also inhumane. If we can take the money that we're putting into 4118 into teams of mental health providers, social workers, working together to build trust with those in the streets who may be resistant to housing because they don't trust that they're going to receive what they are said that they'll receive, then we can finally be able to move them into the housing that we can provide.
I want to talk a bit about public safety. If elected, you've said that you would fire LAPD Chief Jim McDonnell, you would redirect money from LAPD to community services. The San Fernando Valley already has some of the lowest officer to resident ratios in the city. Valley residents are dealing with surging residential burglaries, auto theft. What would you say to those in this room, those watching online right now, who hear defund the police and panic, thinking, well then who is going to answer my 911 call?
I totally understand that sentiment. When we are scared, we need help. The question is, are the police actually able to help with what we need? The police come after the crime has already occurred. When we call 911 and the crime hasn't occurred yet, the theft hasn't occurred, there's nothing to do. If you, in my experience and many others, when people have called the police and said, hey, there's somebody erratic, I'm feeling nervous about it, the police will come, I've experienced this myself, and the police will say, I can't do anything about it until the crime has already occurred. What I am suggesting us do is prevent crime from occurring in the first place. The way to do that is there's less crime when you provide people with their basic needs, with housing, with good meaningful work, with after-school activities for children, with counseling. So that way we prevent crime from occurring. The goal is, we already know that when you call 911, very few of those calls have to do with violent crime. The vast majority have to do with many other circumstances, mental health. When crisis occurs, we want to ensure that people are being met with the particular expert who is able to support the particular crisis you're going through. I want to use the example, or not example, unfortunately, the story of Yang. Just over 2 years ago, Yang was murdered by police officers in Koreatown. He's the son of a Korean man, a Korean father who had called 911 to ask for help because his son was having a mental health crisis. And so he called for help. The police came and they knocked on the door, and Yang was inside his home, his private residence, and Yang, having a mental health crisis, said, "Don't come in. I'm scared. Don't come in. I don't trust that you're the police. I don't believe you're the police." Of course, the police knocked down the door, and Yang was terrified and was holding a knife because he was scared. He already just said, "I'm scared, and I don't believe you really are the police." And within 6 seconds, he was shot to death. These are the kind of things that we cannot allow to happen. So we must be able to ensure that we are able to, when people are in crisis, find the right experts to support people in crisis and also prevent the crime from beginning. If we can provide mental health for individuals like Yang or other folks, we can stop crime from beginning in the first place.
And what I hear in all of that is don't just treat the symptom, treat the disease. And if there were a Paxlovid, to use the COVID analogy, that would just wipe all of this out, I think everybody would be so tremendously grateful. There's a lot of issues. I imagine the future you are seeing would take a lot of time, a lot of money. Can you explain to us that transition? Because if we're firing, the LAPD chief on day one, it's not like on day two all the problems are going to be solved. So what role, if any, do you see police playing, and what do you see as the ideal number of LAPD officers?
That's a great question. I don't have a particular number in mind. What I will tell you is that right now the police budget is extraordinarily bloated, and it's actually growing under the leadership of Mayor Karen Bass in an effort to be able to expand it as we're moving closer to the Olympics. The truth is, because people here in Los Angeles, many folks, don't actually see the police protecting and serving them, we are looking for something different. And what we see is we're defunding, this is what I often like to say, the police has in fact been defunding our other services, defunding other departments, like the Department of Aging, like the Department of Youth, like the Economic Workplace Development Department, which supports small businesses and workers. These are departments that we need to fund and resource so that people are not turning to crime, so that people don't fall into crises, so we don't need to call 911 as often. So if we can remove funding from the LAPD and put it into the other resources we need, that is a big step forward. The other is, I understand that when I start in office, I plan on firing Chief McDonald. It is time that we replace him with somebody who can join me and join our campaign and join those who voted for me in thinking and reimagining what the police could be, reimagining an option of what real public safety could look like for LA. I do believe here, in one of the most creative cities in the whole world, we can have a bigger imagination to ensure that Angelenos are actually meeting the public safety needs that we have in the city.
We have just about a minute left, and we are here today with hosts the Greater San Fernando Valley Chamber of Commerce, who talked about all the needs of the city. $800 million of city revenue comes from the gross receipt tax. As we've been talking about here today, many business owners see this as a huge burden. They say that's why businesses are leaving the city of LA. Do you support or oppose the idea of a gross receipt tax? And what would you do if elected to help improve the lives of business owners here in LA?
Yeah, sorry, can you repeat that one?
Sure, it's about the gross receipts tax, and as you know, business owners say, we're getting taxed on our revenue here, and that's not working out for us. But it gives so much money to our city. Would you repeal it? Would you modify it? What would you do to make life more bearable and businesses more profitable here in the city of LA?
Yeah, I actually think that the gross receipt tax is a real problem on our small businesses. And so I would actually want to ensure that it's going to be impacting only the larger corporations, so that way we can be supporting our small businesses right now. Just having a full-on, decision where all businesses need to cover this cost when they can't afford it in this moment, I don't think is appropriate. We can find other avenues to ensure that actually the revenue should be coming from those who are wealthiest in our communities, our largest corporations. They can bear the burden. Right now, I'm very supportive of the CEO tax, which is a tax on companies that have CEOs that are making 50 times more than their employees, and it's a progressive tax. And I think ideas and options like that is really the direction that we should be moving so that we can support our small businesses here.
And with the few seconds that we have left on the clock, if you do not make it past this primary election and the general election comes down to a Democrat and a Republican, you are running as a Democrat, would you endorse or support the Democrat in the race? Yes or no?
Yes.
Great. Pastor Ray Huang, thank you very much.